Hi everyone, and welcome to the mini lecture on theory in psychology. So again, I just have some things highlighted that I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on. By no means is this the only important stuff in the book. It's just things that in either I want to talk about or I thought could use a little bit more clarifying or some additional examples for. So first thing is phenomenon. So essentially the way that we define phenomena in psychology is general result that has been observed reliably in systematic empirical research. Right? So this is not just it's been observed out in public, right? Like you might see something consistently happening that doesn't make it a phenomena until it's been highlighted in empirical research. Right? So we save that term for after it's been found time and time again through research. And so some of the phenomena that you may actually be aware of, bystander effect, really common one for social psychologists to talk about. More people who are present in an emergency situation, the less likely that any of them are to help you. So yeah, bystander effect, what we know about it is that if there's less people around, you're more likely to get assistance if you need it than if there's more. This also plays into something called diffusion of responsibility. The idea there is that if there's lots of people around, the individuals will kind of feel less responsible to assist because they feel other people could be helping you out. So we've seen that time and time again, fundamental attribution error. People tend to explain other behavior in terms of personal characteristics as opposed to the situation they are in. So the example I really like to use for this one is if somebody is driving and they cut you off, right? That odds are if they cut you off, you shout out some expletives, you have some very nasty thoughts about them, and it's typically personality driven, right? That's something about that person. Now, when we cut people off, because just about everybody has, we typically justify it very quickly as a situational thing. I didn't realize that my turn was this quick. Siri or Google or whoever it is that you're using as a GPS ultimately didn't tell you that this was your turn, or that there's some reason for us to do it that we explain in our heads. I'm not a bad driver. I'm not a mean person. It's just I didn't recognize that this was my turn or that it snuck up on me or whatever it happens to be. And then there's other ones as well that I won't go into full detail on because certainly this is not about these different phenomena. But again, many of these you've probably heard of in different classes that you've taken. And again, it's because they have been shown time and time again in research that yes, this is a thing. Replication, I don't have it highlighted, but just a quick note, incredibly important. It doesn't happen enough in psychology, but yes, we should be replicating studies and more than just the ones that are listed here. All these studies have been replicated, meaning that they've been repeated. They've also been adapted, which means that they took the original study and then tweaked it a little bit and kind of updated it, and they're finding similar things. But yeah, replication, incredibly important to science as a whole. So theories then. Textbook goes over kind of differences between theories and models and hypotheses, so just want to highlight that a bit. So it's the theory in your text is defined as a coherent explanation or interpretation of one or more phenomena. Although theories can take a variety of forms, one thing they have in common is that they go beyond the phenomena they explain by including variables, structures, processes, functions, and organizing principles that have not been observed directly. Right, so a theory is essentially you have something like, again, I'll pick on the bystander effect, just coming from social psychology. It's one that I'm probably most comfortable with. So we have this phenomena, it's been established, but we can develop theories then as far as like, when can we break this? When will it actually show that if you have a lot of people around, we can actually get somebody assistance when they need it? That's going to be your theory, right? Is that you're looking at variables, you're looking at these factors, And so you will theorize, if this were to happen, having lots of people around may be beneficial. Or vice versa, when is it ultimately kind of the worst case scenario of them all? What type of crimes are we likely to see bystander effect, and what type of crimes are we not? Right. So you're going more specific, and you're adding in these different things to develop a theory. So then model, precise explanation or interpretation of a specific phenomena, often expressed in terms of equations, computer programs, or biological structures and processes. So models are very much mathematical in nature. They don't necessarily have to be, but most of the models that come to my mind, they steal from kind of mathematical formulas. A lot of times the models that we will use in psychology are actually for analysis. So like we can have path analysis model and structural equation modeling and things like that. But certainly we can develop models for more psychological processes as well. And again, you'll see some of those in your text, but most of the time we don't really dive into the model area. We stick more within the theories side or the hypothesis side. But yes, models, we do have them in psych, but you're going to see them much more in like neuropsychology, biopsychology, those realms. Cognitive psych will also use models. And then hypothesis can be an explanation that relies on just a few key concepts, although this term more commonly refers to prediction about new phenomena based on theory. And yeah, I wanted to highlight this because it's overused, and there is multiple connotations for a hypothesis. So people can say, I have this hypothesis that X, Y, and Z happen. But when we look at hypotheses in a more common sense, they are typically reserved for, as it says here, the second one of it's a prediction, right? That you say, all right, I know this theory exists, I've studied it, I have this hypothesis that this will happen in this particular study. The explanation that relies on just a few key concepts, this is the best way that I was told is it's the guy at the bar that says, well, I have a hypothesis that Sagittariuses are mean. Okay, it's not really a prediction based upon a theory. It's just their explanation as to why the person was mean to them a little bit ago, that they think that their birth date had some impact, right? So that's the first form, which again, in the research side of psychology, you don't hear much at all used in that term. You almost always hear it in the second, but you will still have general conversations that you will see psychologists and people just throw out the term hypothesis, but they don't mean a prediction. So what are theories for? I have these two highlighted because I think it's an incredibly important thing to think about, especially for modern psychology. And I'll talk about what I mean by that in a little bit. But a theory can be accurate without being useful. Right, so the example that the Hex uses is great. To say that expressive writing helps people deal with their emotions might be accurate as far as it goes, but it seems too vague to be of much use. Right, so sure, expressive writing helps people deal with their emotions. It's a fine theory, but again, there's going to be much more. What emotions? What exactly is expressive writing? There's a lot of subjectivity here. And what if somebody isn't good at writing or isn't comfortable with writing? Do we just say they're screwed? That type of stuff is what it means by too vague to use. If you're somebody that likes to write and you can do it very easily and you already know that it helps get your feelings out on paper, then sweet. But it probably didn't need a theory to tell you that. It was probably something you already did naturally. Right, so again, just it's correct, but is it actually that useful to know? That's certainly debatable. The opposite side of that, a theory can be useful without being entirely accurate. that's where, we have this more modern psychological spin being put. There's a lot of pushback against the old way of doing psych. The old way of doing psychology was you have to show significance for it to be worthwhile. And now we're kind of at the point recognizing not showing something works is kind of important as well. That it helps build the literature, it helps us move forward, and it saves time from a bunch of other people doing the same thing when it's not working. And who knows how many people have gone down that rabbit hole, but ultimately nobody ever wrote about it because it wasn't shown to work. So absolutely can be useful without being entirely true. Example your text uses is this image, which is just kind of fun, because if you took cognitive psych, if you remember from your general psychology or introduction to psychology, odds are you have seen this image in the textbook, on PowerPoint slides somewhere, or something very close to it. And we kind of know memory doesn't actually work this way. It's a good, nice representation to introduce students to, but ultimately it's not actually correct, right? So here it says, classic representation of memory. This would be considered a model as well, that you have kind of biological processes here, which is still cited by researchers, discussed in textbooks, despite the fact that it is now known to be inaccurate in a number of ways, right? So it's not that it is completely, absolutely wrong. It's just that there's a lot more things going on besides this that are not represented by this image, but it's simplistic, and so people really like this concept. Other things that theories help is organizing. So it allows us to really begin to clump theories together. It allows us to clump concepts together, looking at the different types of theories. It also allows us to do, like here we have a hierarchical model. So this is a idea of just one theory of intelligence, that we have this overall G, lowercase g, which just stands for general intelligence, and it's made up of these components, right? So it allows us, again, to kind of organize things in a way that makes sense, because again, a lot of the research, the point of it is to get the information out to average everyday people. And if we can do stuff like this, organize it well, it's understandable instead of talking about all the stats and everything else that goes along with it. Prediction. So ideally, theories allow us to predict future events. It allows us to predict what is likely to happen in different scenarios, things like that. So yeah, that one's fairly self-explanatory, that we want theories so that way we can better understand human behavior and not be caught off guard. And then generation new research, kind of the big one for a research methods class, is that, yeah, ideally our theories are creating new novel research, that we're not just kind of stuck doing the same thing time and time again, but we're having people learn these theories and coming up with new creative ways to apply them. Especially as society changes, technology changes, there's new ways to check things like bystander effect. We now have live streaming, and there's been numerous incidences of people live streaming their suicides, live streaming different SWAT attacks, where it's typically in the gaming realm, but gamers are calling in bomb threats or calling in domestic terrorist threats against a competitor who is doing well or has insulted them online. And people are live streaming this and just kind of watching it and not doing anything to prevent it, not letting people know, hey, you're in danger. There has been a few killings through swatting, right? All this type of stuff. It's new because it's a brand new environment. And, ideally those theories will start to be applied to say, like, do they still work in this environment? Yes or no? And then, so that's it for 4.1. 4.2, a little bit too fast there. So 4.2, a variety of theories. Formality, don't want to highlight anything there, but scope. So theories in psychology also vary widely in their scope, the number and diversity of the phenomena they explain or interpret. Many early psychological theories were extremely broad in that they attempted to interpret essentially all human behavior. We don't do that anymore. Right? Like that's kind of a big flash thing that should go across the screen. Absolutely, that was the idea, was to get one universal theory that explains why people do everything that they do. And we recognize humans are far too complex for that. They're also far too unique from individual to individual. Can we explain, some common things like eating? Everybody needs to eat, yes, but within that, everybody has their own kind of diet, their own amount, their own favorites, all that type of stuff. That to come up with a universal idea of like, why do people like ice cream? It's not going to be feasible because inevitably you're going to run into the person that's like, I don't like ice cream. Well, then that theory doesn't hold water, right? So we've kind of broken it down into much smaller ones. Cognitive dissonance theory is mentioned here as, kind of a broad one, but certainly still does not explain everything, which is a good example. Again, it's from social psychology. Probably why I enjoy this textbook as much as I do as a social psychologist is that they bring in a lot of the theories from social psych. I will also say, completely tangential side note, this is from the University of Minnesota. University of Minnesota has a very prominent social psychology PhD program. So the authors most likely are either social psychologists in nature or they're grad students in social psychology. So yeah, you're going to run into a lot of social psych concepts and theories in here. Theoretical approach then. So you have functional theories, explain phenomena in terms of their function or purpose. Example, one prominent theory of repeated self-injury, which is cutting, is that people do it because it produces a short-term reduction in intensity of negative emotions that they are feeling. Note that this theory is not focused on how this happens, but on the function of self-injury for the people who engage in it. Right, so when we have functional theories, it is looking, it's named appropriately, at the function of it. Why does this happen? It's not looking at the how, what led up to somebody actually deciding to do cutting and what's happening in their current life and their past life. None of that stuff matters for functional theories. It's just what is the function of actually doing this, right? What is the function for exercise? What is the function for studying, right? Why are you doing this? Not looking at anything else that explains it, just at that moment, what is going on. So that's a functional theory. Mechanistic theory, excuse me. Cancel. Focus on specific variable structures and processes and how they interact to produce the phenomena. So here, the text uses the example of hypochondrias. So people that typically view regular body pains and aches and all that type of stuff as this is it, right? Like my time has come. I'm going to die. This is cancer or some other very serious illness when it's just kind of a minor headache. So here it's looking at what are all the different types of factors, what variables come into play here, how do they interact with one another, right? It's a very kind of machine-like system that you're focused in on all of these variables that say if this is happening, then this is likely to happen, this is likely to happen. And it's trying to get a much broader idea of why do people suffer from hypochondria. So again, functional versus mechanistic. Functional, very specific to what it is. Mechanistic tries to get all the different factors around it. And then we got the last unit, using theories. So I don't have much highlighted in here, to be quite honest, just because it's, again, kind of applied type stuff that it's for when you're getting ready to go. But I do have, towards the end, just some kind of take-home messages that I think are important. So evaluating and revising theories. Just because a theory has been supported for a very long time doesn't mean that we should constantly be assuming it is right. Or like we need to be looking at it again and seeing, does it still hold water? I mean, a lot of the theories that we have in psychology come from 1950s, 60s, 70s. A lot's changed in those 50 to 70 years. And we have to be aware of that and recognize, like, okay, maybe how this used to work isn't actually the same anymore. Maybe something's happened societal that has changed it and has made people view things differently, whatever it happens to be. So absolutely, we have to be evaluating the theories. Does this make sense still? And then also revising it when we find flaws. So if you're doing a bystander effect study and all of a sudden you're starting to see more helping behavior, we have to revise it and we have to say, all right, it used to be this. We're now seeing this trend happen. We need further investigation to see how strong this new trend is. And that should be an ongoing process. And then incorporating theories into research. So this is honestly for when you're thinking about your research proposal, is that ideally you are testing some theory that you find interesting. Again, there's many phenomena ones listed there that have theories about them in the text. So maybe one of those catch your interest. Maybe just something else is that you have not seen phenomena as the textbook defines it, but maybe it's just something that you've encountered yourself. Um, I will say, using kind of a personal example, and this is research I got recognized at a conference, and I got a fun award and some money for it. Was I looked at sexual assault in the military. I, never part of the military, no family members in the military. I came across a news story that said, the estimated number of sexual assaults in the military was this, and it was incredibly high. And I was like, that seems odd. Like, how did the estimates work? And once I started reading into it, there's a lot of weird things that happen in the military when we look at legal issues, right? Like they go through court martials instead of court and all this other stuff that I'm like, okay, maybe that number is not as insane as I actually thought it was. So started looking to different theories and came across a bunch of theories talking about power differentials. And typically the theories house for sexual assault, at least, are power differentials between like boss and employee or teacher and student. But I wasn't coming across anything that talked about like superior officer to private, right, or whatever it would be. And so I was like, all right, well, maybe I can apply the power differential theory to this. And I conducted a study on it where essentially I created a scenario that sexual assault happens in the military between people of the same rank or between people in different ranks. And typically, when it was of different ranks, my participants wanted to punish more severely, despite the fact that it's the same crime, right? But it feels worse. And so I was able to apply that power differential theory in this new area. Now, again, it certainly would not be listed as 100% factual. New studies have to be done and it has to be verified. But it brought power differential theory into a brand new realm, which is why it got some recognition. So, that's things to think about is, all right, you see something in your personal life happen or you read about something and ask the question why, and then search like, is there possible theories that could explain this that hasn't yet? And then, you go from there. And then I think that is it. Yeah. So again, goal of these mini lectures, keep them under 30 minutes. I think we did that. If you have any questions about anything that was covered in this chapter, if you want to start talking about some ideas for your research proposal, absolutely do not hesitate to contact me. Otherwise, I hope you have a good week.